Hello and welcome to Government Issue. My name is Douglas Grindle. This is a program which looks at the experiences of the veterans of Worcester County, the people who served in America's armed forces, America's GIs, and more. Now tonight I'm joined by two gentlemen who have experience of the war in Korea. I'm joined by Mr. Ken Swift, who was in the United States Marine Corps back then in 1952 and 1953. And I'm also joined by Mr. Ed Gregory, who's also served United States Army in Korea back then in 1950. Now before we get started, let's take a brief look at exactly how that war got started back there in Korea back in 1950. The Cold War that began at the end of World War II suddenly became a hot war on June 25, 1950, when the Communist forces of North Korea invaded South Korea. There were few American troops there, and they were quickly pushed back to a small perimeter at the south of the Korean peninsula. The situation looked grim for American and South Korean forces, but then in a spectacular end run, American forces made an amphibious landing at Incheon, miles behind Communist lines. The North Koreans retreated in disarray. Victorious Allied troops followed closely, pushing well into North Korea. But then as American troops closed on the border with China, Chinese troops suddenly attacked. American forces fought their way south in a bloody retreat. The line stabilized near the original border, and the stage was set for 3 more years of bloody trench fighting. Well, that look at the Korean War gets us started. Now, it was a complete surprise, or an almost complete surprise, to America's political leaders. And let me ask you this, Mr. Swift. Now, surprise for America's political leaders. How about you? Were you a little surprised to see this happening way thousands of miles away?
Actually, it didn't make much sense to us when we first heard it. That was, we heard about the Korean War starting, but it didn't have any impact on us. The impact didn't come till about a week later, when we realized that this just wasn't a limited skirmish that we were going to take care of overnight.
Did you get a sense, though, that you know, hundreds of thousands of people were involved in this great war? Did it just seem like it was, those first early days, you didn't know that much about it?
Well, that's true. We watched it, though, when it first happened. But what alerted us to the fact that this was something real serious is they froze all anybody that was getting discharged on July 1st. And that was about a week after the war started.
So that was sort of bad news for anyone looking to get out of the armed services at that point. Now, Mr. Gregory, did you also have a pretty good feel for when it started? Were you a little surprised it began?
Well, they canceled all leaves and passes when we were in Fort Lewis, Washington. We all had to report back to our company, and we knew then they evacuated the whole division was going to Korea. And it didn't take long for them to load up them ships. I think they used somewhere around 17 ships in the harbor of Tacoma and Puget Sound in Seattle.
And so that would have been in the same summer, so it didn't take very long, I guess, for the American military to get geared up to make sure that it started to head overseas then.
No, it didn't. In fact, they flew some over ahead of us to set up areas and get like a perimeter and set up so they know where they can come into without being invaded and attacked before we land. And we're all on ships, and orders were given from there on, and nothing was said till we landed in Busan.
Take it from there. Well, now, Mr. Swift, I mean, why do you get a sense that America didn't just say, well, these North Koreans, the communist North Koreans, are attacking our, our democratic allies, the South Koreans, democratic or autocratic? You can sort of argue about that, I guess, but really not a communist regime, a pretty democratic regime in the South. Why do you get a sense that America didn't just say, well, it doesn't matter to us, we don't really care?
Well, unfortunately, we gave the North Koreans and the Chinese that same thought. No, it's and the Russians too. No, it's that we were not going to defend the South Koreans, basically, and that's probably one of the reasons why the Korean War started. So, as far as taking it further, then certainly we were committed to South Korea. And of course, you can see our determination once we got started.
Well, now, when you say that we sort of gave these people the wrong idea that perhaps this wouldn't be in America's interest to get involved, I mean, was it just so far away that you think that the North Koreans just figured, well, they won't care?
No, I guess some of our dignitaries at that time said that this was not within the scope of our interest to protect South Korea at the time. So we kind of gave the North Koreans an idea this was carte blanche, that they could do whatever they wanted.
Now, Mr. Gregory, now you were over there. It didn't take you very long. I mean, this all started in the end of June, as I saw. Is when this war began. And when did you actually make it over there?
I arrived on the Korean grounds on August 6th of 1950.
And that was what was the situation on the ground? Now, at that point, all of the Allied troops, American and South Korean, had been forced back into this tiny perimeter down the south.
Well, they were trying to push us up as fast as they could to the Pusan perimeter to defend the Naktong River and keep the North Koreans from coming across. If they came across that Naktong River, they would have pushed everybody right into the ocean, and they would have had it all.
Right into the sea. Did you have a sense when you landed that the Allies had their backs to the wall?
No, not really. I did not know that much about the war, and being young, I was only 17 on ship, and it's funny, I would like to say one thing though, because it tells you something about young GIs that are going to war and know nothing. And when we're on this ship going over, we always talk about war and what we're going to do when we get there and medals we're going to win. I always hear people talk about, oh, I'm going to win a Distinguished Service Cross, the Congressional Medal of Honor, the Bronze Star, Silver Star. But in all the men I've spoke to, I have yet never heard one ever say, I'm going to win the Purple Heart. Nobody wants that, because that's the one you have to earn by getting wounded by the enemy. And it could cost you your life.
Do you get a sense then, do you get a sense, Mr. Swift, as well, that that's sort of something which people just didn't realize going in? It's not in the nature of people to think about that going in?
I would suspect so, but aboard ship that, I think all of us were kind of contemplating before we got to Korea. Now, it's just what was going to happen over there. Now, we had no perception of really what was taking place. We knew what was going on in the war, but we didn't know what our role would be at that moment.
And so, now, Mr. Gregory, they push you up to this, to your positions. I suppose they must have sort of rushed you towards the front lines, because obviously, it's quite a volatile situation at that point.
Well, we had a lot of meetings and talks and things of what we're going to do in training, of just what to do when we get up there. And you can tell when you're going into war and when it's real bad, when you give you all the ammunition, hand grenades, and they tell you lock and load. That means the enemy's right in front of you. Once you lock and load, that means anything comes across there, you shoot back. And they put you up in positions, and thank God we had a lot of World War II sergeants, because they were the brains of the outfit. They fought World War II, and they helped us get through this. I learned a lot from them. And when you're in the war, you want to learn, you want to come home. I was a BAR man, and the sergeant always says to me, he said, Gregory, I need that weapon you got, and I need you operating it. So you do what I tell you, and I'll see if I can get you home all right.
Now, Mr. Swift, can you give us a little bit of sort of a perspective on this? I mean, we have all of these people, these American forces coming in. We have the North Koreans sort of like hemming everyone in the southern part of the peninsula. I mean, was this sort of a situation where America was sort of at a disadvantage in terms of all of these thousands of people, communists were coming down and like shooting at them, and perhaps they were in kind of a sticky situation?
A disadvantage, to say the least, because at that moment, I'm sure they didn't know whether they would get pushed back into the ocean or not, or the Sea of Japan, as it was. So, luckily, what Ed just alluded to is that the World War II veterans, the reserves that got recalled, basically, were the secret to our success there, because many of them, in fact, we know that the First Signal Company got recalled from Worcester. That was a Marine group, and they went to Camp Lejeune, and many of them went right over to Korea.
And do you get a sense that people at home at that point sort of knew what people were doing over there, or were they all sort of going off in these troop ships in some sort of a big black hole?
My sense that, the ones that were involved like us, we were watching very closely. I don't think the rest of the general population had a sense of what was really taking place there.
And Mr. Gregory, when you were moving up then, now obviously you're up on the front lines. Now you're facing the North Koreans. I mean, what was that like?
Well, you have your orders when you're up on that line, and you cannot withdraw unless they tell you. You have to hold that line and hold that position. No matter what happens, you hold that position. And if you run out of ammo, you have to send somebody down to get more ammo to help resupply. Things get real bad, they try to send up reinforcements. But the enemy had us outnumbered at the beginning of the war. They came charging across that river. We blew the bridges out. They rebuilt them at night under the water. They built them just below the water so they can come across. You can't even see it. And once they come across at nighttime, they're in your lines already. And you have to keep shooting flares up there and look for them at night and hope that they don't get you.
Now, Mr. Swift, you were facing the North Koreans, and you were facing the Chinese as well, I suppose. Because you were there a little bit later on. Now, what were these soldiers like? Were they pretty professional, pretty good people? I mean, both of you, really.
You mean as far as the Chinese and North Koreans?
Yeah.
Well, absolutely. In fact, by the time I got there, because they had about 2 years more experience too. And of course, that's not to say that, about the experience that they had previously, because they had been engaged in long wars with Japan.
And so this is this would be, the Chinese have been, I suppose, since 1933 or so. So they'd been fighting for 17 years already. I guess they were pretty well practiced.
And that's right. In 1949, if you remember, the Chinese communists took over the Chinese mainland at that time too.
So this is like a completely unstable sort of an atmosphere back then.
It certainly was.
Well, the North Koreans were well trained because they pulled what the Japanese did in World War II. They pulled banzais. They line them all up, they hide behind bushes, and they camouflage themselves, they blow whistles, horns, and they charge fixed bayonets. And boy, that is something scary to listen to and see, and they keep coming right at you. And if you ain't got enough men to put them down, you're gone.
And so what do you do in a situation?
You've got to keep firing at them and hold them down. Got to hope that more men can come up and put them down. And unless you get orders to move, you got to pull out of there.
Now, Mr. Gregory, you had your experience. I mean, you had one day, one night, you had a problem with there were simply too many of them, weren't there?
Well, yes, there was. They all made it into our lines through the night. We were surrounded.
So tell us a little bit about, what they were trying to get across a river, is that towards you?
They got across. They did get across, and we didn't know how many, and we were on very strict alert that passwords were given out. Don't take anything for granted. Make sure that you are secure with your man. You got ammo and you're ready to fire. If anybody says anything, you got to shoot first and ask questions later, or they'll take you out. And what you do is you stay together. You listen to your commands, and they tell you where you're going to move out. You got to take up another position. You can't stay too long in one position because they'll overrun it. And you got to hope for daybreak.
And Mr. Swift, it must be, especially at the nighttime, does that make it much more difficult? It must be pretty scary out there at night, or not scary, but certainly, I can't imagine being out there at night having people out there trying to shoot me.
Well, I can't imagine what Ed went through, basically, because I'm glad I never had to face what he did, because that must have been really scary. But however, there's no doubt that night situations do bring an extra dimension. I remember one night I was on a one-man patrol where I had to patrol the perimeter of our unit when the Chinese had broken through, and they took all our able-bodied men to fill in the gaps, and I was the one that was left to patrol the outside of the perimeter by myself at nighttime.
It must have been pretty uncomfortable.
I had to question myself a few times and just push myself along. Of course, I think that's a lot better, though, than the position that Ed was in, though.
Now, Mr. Gregory, tell us a little bit more about this. Now,
well,
if you're...
When daybreak did break, and we're trying to figure our position out, see what we got left.
And at this point, there's Chinese or North Korean troops behind you, between you and where the rest of the American Army is.
And you'd listen to we had one lieutenant with us and a few sergeants. And half our company was already killed, wiped out. Half of them, at least. And what we do is try to regroup, stay together and hold the position or get on the high ground and hope that more troops can come in and get you out of there, or you run into more of your own men. In the meantime, all the enemy were up on the top, and they were shooting down at us. And now it was like a turkey shoot. They had us all pinned down, and I'll never forget this Corporal Compass hollering to me, over here, because there were bullets whizzing all around us. And I ran to where he was. He was in a big rice paddy, a trench. And I jumped in there. It was waist high in mud and water. And he said to me, you shoot him that way, and I'll shoot him this way. And we had quite a bit of shooting going on there till I heard a clunk. And that clunk was him taking one in the head. It went right through his helmet and hit him in the head. And he died almost instantly. Now, I was all alone in that trench, and I told you before about these banzais, and I looked out there and I could see him coming. I've just turned 18 years old, but we had good training, and you put it together. Well, don't get me wrong, we were scared, but when I looked out there and I saw it's the them or me, and I just kept firing at BIR, threw my last hand grenade. When I pulled the trigger and the bolt went home, that was the end of that. Pulled my 45 out, shot what I had, and here they come. So I did not want to stay in that trench and take a bayonet. It would have stabbed me right through the neck of the chest. I jumped up out of there and I took off. Now, I was surrounded, no matter where I went. And they opened up with a burp gun. And they shot me through the arm, laid me down, and I was taken prisoner. And maybe 20 minutes later, they rounded up 4 more men from my company.
That's a company of how many people?
Our company had 211 men in it, and I don't know how many got out wounded, but only 5 were from my company taken prisoner.
Wow.
Only 5 of us.
That's amazing. And what happened after they take you prisoner? I take it then that they start to march you back in the back. What happens then?
No, they held us in a group, and they took our boots away right away. You know, they never saw boots like that, GI boots. They took them. You go barefoot. And I had blood coming down my hand, running down my arm, and Sergeant Fernandez was going to patch it for me with his first aid packet. They ripped it off him, ripped mine off, and they looked at me and laughed. But he did tie it with a hanky to stop it from bleeding, and thank God I didn't get infection, and it wasn't, a bad wound. It was bad enough, but it wasn't, an artery cut, and I was lucky to get through that. But they just looked at you and laughed.
And Mr. Swift, did you get a sense? I mean, this is a war which people might think, well, there are certain rules which you have to follow. Did you ever get a sense that perhaps, in situations then maybe the rules don't apply anymore?
I suppose that's very true. Of course, when I was there, this was a static war, so the war had changed dramatically towards the type of war the fluid war that Ed was in. Now, when I was there, it was just a war of real estate. They would take a hill, we'd take it back, basically. So.
But you did you get a sense that there were certain rules which they were following at that point?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Right. But now, Mr. Gregory, now you're you're going through something which there's sort of, seems to me, a contravention of rules to be taking wounded people's dressing away.
Well, that's the Geneva Convention. We're always the ones that live up to it, but they never do. And another instance is they brought in more prisoners. They rounded up more, and we ended up with 128 that were grouped together from different outfits, and we were on our march. And they couldn't march us during the day because the planes would come down and strafe us. We're in enemy territory. So they march you at nighttime, and if you don't move, you slow up that column, they'll shoot you right there.
And so were they giving you something to eat, to keep going?
Probably every other night, if you were lucky, they come into a village, and they get the mama-san out. She cooks rice for all the guards. They eat first. And if there's any left, you might be lucky and get a ball of rice, a small little ball they put in your hand, if you're lucky.
And this was how many days did they keep you marching?
28. Actually, 27. The 28th day was the day we got liberated.
Now, if you don't mind me asking, I mean, how do you march for 28 days on a ball of rice every 2 days with no boots? And I take it, what time of year was this?
This was September. The nights were cold. But when you got a bunch of wounded men around and they want to live, they try to survive, you look at the situation, no matter how bad you are, there's somebody worse. And it's like a bond you have together. You want to get through this. And the sergeants keep telling you, don't panic, we'll have a better day tomorrow. Maybe they'll find us. Maybe they'll come and get us. They always had a good outlook on it, and it kept us moving in that direction. And it was very good that the sergeant did this because we would have panicked. And some of them didn't. Some of them couldn't take it. They just, there's one in particular that he gave up. He couldn't march no more. His foot was all blood, and he just couldn't take it. It hurt so bad, and that was Jimmy Montoya, and he was in my company. And they were going to come over and shoot him. And I looked at him, and he says, go ahead, I can't go on the wall, let him shoot me. And I don't know what come over me. I just reached over and grabbed the guy, threw him over my back. I knew I didn't want to live with this the rest of my life, knowing I left somebody laying there and dead, And I threw him on my back, and I don't know how I did it. And I just walked with him and walked, and another guy reaches over, takes him right off my back, puts him on his. And now that's what I'm telling you, how you work together as a team. And you can get through it. And today that guy's alive, and it took him 40 years to find me. And what a joy that was when he called my house to thank me for saving his life, But
it's amazing. Now,
Sure is.
Well, Mr. Swift, I mean, did you get a sense too when you were there that I mean, what's it like? I mean, when you're over there and you're fighting, and you're in these situations and it's a hostile environment and it's like, you're right there in the combat zone, and yet are you thinking about, well, I'm doing this for my country, or thinking about, well, I'm, it's just we're just all in this together trying to get through?
No, I think at that time, I think the spirit of World War II had carried over. Because as youngsters coming through World War II, we saw how all the veterans were looked upon, you know, and so we still had that aura about us. Now it's thinking that, yes, the country is worth fighting for, and we were certain of that.
And so, Mr. Gregory, what happened then once you've gone through this? I mean, what happened to the people on the march? Would you lose a lot of weight? Just keep going? Would you?
Yes, we keep going as far as we can. And in fact, what happened was, out of 128 of us, after 28 days, only 87 survived. Some died from wounds, and some they killed in cold blood because they couldn't keep up, and they just pushed us along, made us go, and they shoot them.
And what happened after 28 days?
After 28 days, the 25th Recon Division was looking at all the battle sites. They couldn't find the bodies. Where were all the men from these battles? And they knew that there were men up ahead. Somebody had a prisoner somewhere. And going up there, they did find a whole bunch of GIs with their hands tied behind their back, and they were shot, killed. And they knew there were more up there. And they kept coming and coming and coming, and by God, they knew we were there.
Why would they kill all these people in cold blood?
They didn't want to take out it. They didn't want to guard them. See, the North Koreans are trained to kill, not to guard. This is their country, and you're invading their country. So why should they guard you as a prisoner when they can shoot you and fight you too?
Makes sense.
So that's the way they do it. You ever hear that story many years ago when he used to say, take no prisoners? Well, that's the way it works.
That's the philosophy, right. And Mr. Swift, did you get a sense, though, that people I mean, when you got over there, did you realize that this sort of thing was going on, would happen, had happened?
Oh, actually, we would check the news every day from where we were. In other words, we'd look and see what's happening. In other words, we were well aware of the things that were taking place. And of course, we would check the casualty list in our Leatherneck magazine. And of course, then we'd see friends of ours. Of course, at that time, I was stationed at Virginia Beach.
And did you get a sense, though, that you might be at Virginia Beach for a while, but did you know that you were going to Korea? Or when did you find out?
No, actually, I could have stayed at Virginia Beach because I was on duty there, and I had to volunteer to go to Korea. So I had to write a letter to request Korean duty.
And when you got over there, was it as you expected?
I guess we didn't know what to expect, but you know, from all accounts, I think it was probably, we were pretty well oriented on what to expect.
And at that point, when you mentioned this trench warfare, now why was that so much different from Mr. Gregory's experience?
Well, of course, they could never say that they had a place that they could call their own. You know, as they were on the move all the time, and they didn't know where the enemy was. At least most of the time, we knew that the enemy was that way, right in front of us. Now, it's with Ed's situation where they were surrounded many times, and it was a fluid war. They could never tell which way was the front and which way was the back. So.
And now this whole thing of going up towards the border and all of that sort of thing, you know, and then being pushed back down, it must have been very difficult knowing that you're going over, that the American forces came that close to sort of like occupying the whole of North Korea, right up almost to the Chinese border, and then have that sort of slip away, so to speak, simply because all of these Chinese troops were now coming down. It must have been a little bit, or was it at that point, was it simply, well, this is just like the situation, we're going to accept it?
Of course, I had some friends that were stationed with me, and they were transferred to Korea when I stayed back at Quantico at that time. So we watched very closely what was happening. So when they showed up on the casualty list, in fact, the friend that I joined the Marine Corps with was killed in that battle of the Chosin Reservoir. So,
which was during that big retreat back
that's right, the big
yeah.
retreat. That's when the Chinese came in the war.
And Mr. Gregory, when the American troops came up and you were liberated, did you get a sense then that perhaps if the North Koreans had been, you know, not following the rules of war at all, did you get a sense that perhaps you wouldn't make it through, that perhaps they wouldn't be keen on you going back under America?
Well, they started tying our hand 10 at a time. They told us they were going to take us up to Seoul. We knew better. There were no trucks out there to take us, and they were tying us to take us out to shoot us. And we made plans that we were going to jump them. We know they're going to kill us, but we're going to go down fighting. And I have to say that I was really honored to serve with the men I did. These guys had a lot of honor, and they were brave men, honest to goodness. My heart goes out to the poor ones that got killed over there. They are really our true heroes, and you know, this is why we go on like we do. It's like our duty to make sure that they're never forgotten.
And did you get a sense then, you know, that when you're over there, did you get a sense why you were there? That this whole is sort of a geopolitical struggle, I guess. But did you know why you were there?
Yes, later on we did. We figured, I mean, we're part of the Army, we're in the infantry, you're trained to fight a war, and you do what you're told, and that's the way we do it.
And Mr. Swift, what about you? Did you get a pretty good sense as to what was going on?
I'm sure I did, because we were developing that sense, and of course we realized that we had to stop communism, and this was the point that we were making.
And did you get a sense, though, that communism was something which, you know, sure there was Russia and China, but that it was simply spreading and you had to do something to stop it from spreading, or was this just sort of you didn't really see it like that?
Well, I think that all of us sensed that communism intent was to take over the world, and this was a place that if we couldn't stop them, we could at least slow them down. And I think that was the net result.
And then, Mr. Gregory, what happened to you after that? After you were, where did you go after that?
Well, we were liberated, and we were taken away. The most severely wounded were put on helicopters and taken to hospitals, and we were brought into MASH hospitals where we immediately were sprayed with DDT because we were loaded with lice. And we burned all our clothes. They didn't want to go near us. And they spray us, and then they, you know, take us into tents and give you first aid, and then move you into hospitals. And I think we must have had 5 showers a day to try to get rid of all the lice and the diseases you picked up in the war.
And Mr. Swift, when you were doing all this, could you see an end of the war, or not really? Could you see it happening?
I think we were sensing it all the time. In fact, there was so much talk about, you know, a ceasefire, and all the time that I was there, even before I got there, and the discussions were going on in Panmunjom, and we were stationed not too far from there. So we had a real sense of what was taking place then.
Excellent. Well, I'd like to thank you both for being here. I'm afraid we have to stop it short there, but it's been a real pleasure having you on. Mr. Ken Swift served with the United States Marine Corps in Korea, and also Mr. Ed Gregory served with the American Army in Korea, and also was briefly captured by the North Koreans, and what an experience. So, but thank you both here for being with us, and on behalf of all of us here at Government Issue, I'd like to thank you at home for joining us. I'm Douglas Grindle, and I hope you'll join us again soon.
Thank you. We were honored.
Thank you for having us.
Now, did you get a sense, though, that with these prisoner exchanges at the end of the war, that finally you could see all of these people coming back? Did you have any sort of a sense that there were really a lot of people on the other side who were really suffering for years, waiting to come back?
Absolutely.